Throughout Europe during the medieval times and on through later years, much of agriculture was subsistence farming to feed individual families rather than the organized, large-scale production common today. While this method of farming provided most of what a family would need, cash was still essential for everyday life and for procuring products that couldn't be found on the farm. This forced people to diversify their production so that they would have more commodities to sell in a marketplace. Often families would send the best goods to market and keep the remainder for themselves. Decorative gardens were not the norm, as people were focused on surviving and making some money to help support the family rather than making a place pretty to look at.
Walled cities of the Middle Ages period meant that gardens of an individual had to be cramped and relatively small. Most of the plants in a given garden were more for function rather than fashion. However, many people snuck in some annuals over time and they seeded themselves in, giving the appearance of some decoration. These plants were typically found up against the houses or in window troughs or something similar. One of the few exceptions to this rule was royalty. They were able to expand and have some luxurious parts to their garden, but in this time in history, gardening for aesthetics was not a common sight. Typical plants found in one of these gardens include common herbs used in cooking, there's tomatoes, peppers, and in the proper areas of France, grape growing was also common for the wine. Many people learned that since they did not have much flat space, they developed ways to grow plants upward using ladders and trellises, which you can see in some of these pictures. And once the walls of the typical cities came down in history, it led to a new wave of French gardening.
When you think of French gardens, you often think of extensive, lavish gardens owned by royalty. The style of these gardens are full of symmetry and impose order on nature. They are immense and unbelievable. A very popular example of such a garden is within the Palace of Versailles, that is laden with immense gardens that exude royalty. Versailles is located just outside the city of Paris. It is the epitome of a French royal garden. The property features 11 fountains, paths lined with well-manicured bushes, and immense paths to follow the bask in the enjoyment of the garden.
French Baroque gardens started appearing between 1603 to 1714. This style was heavily influenced by the Catholic Church because they wanted gardens to convey the idea of emotional involvement. These gardens were huge, fancy, and formal, and had exaggerated motions and strong attention to detail. Baroque gardens also consisted of symmetry and intricate designs. Perspective also played a big role in these gardens. The height, width, depth, and position of the buildings in the area and the sculptures and fountains had to be pleasing to the eye. When Baroque gardens first began to appear, they were held to high esteem, being viewed as a symbol of control over nature, wealth, and importance. This gardening style has lasted through many, many centuries and still influences people today.
France is known nowadays for its communal parks and a variety of private gardens. Many of these parks and gardens consist of elements taken from their past, with a few changes to enhance the experience. Some critical elements still seen today from earlier gardens are their topiary skills, the symmetry throughout the garden, which is still also present, and 90-degree angles seem to be their choice. Some of these changes include the array of plants. They are being imported from places farther and farther away, and with technology, the gardens are able to upkeep them. Whether they be from tropical areas or Arctic areas, it does not matter because of the technology we have. They can place them in greenhouses in the off-season and place them out when they will be able to thrive. People make France a vacation spot for these parks and gardens specifically because of their uniqueness compared to other gardens around the world. People will simply just take a walk with whoever they're with, whether it be friends, pets, or family, and simply enjoy the views. Whether it be trying to find out what kind of plants they are, or even just looking at the different elements like fountains or statues within the garden.